just passed and signed by Governor Matt Bevin, a new concealed carry law in Kentucky, Senate Bill 150, passed with bipartisan support and opposition in both the House and Senate. Arriving on the governor's desk, the law will allow people in Kentucky to carry a concealed gun without getting a permit or completing a background check and safety training. To talk about this, Emily Taylor joins us on the AcuteHearingCenters.com hotline. Good morning, Emily. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
So, people, and I'm fine, thank you. People who are pro-guns and believe wholeheartedly in the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights of our Constitution of the United States of America, note that what it says essentially is the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Do you think that having a permit to conceal carry is an infringement upon Second Amendment rights?
Well, gun people are of two minds about this. And really, at the end of the day, what we think is inconsequential because the Supreme Court has said that having a concealed carry permit is not an infringement on Second Amendment rights. And whether we agree or disagree with that sentiment, it is governing law right now. So, we have sort of even people who are very pro-Second Amendment who are a little bit split on this topic. An expansion of gun rights is always a good thing, but of course, we want to be sure that people who are carrying firearms are carrying responsibly, and that's a little bit harder to control without permits.
Part of what was Kentucky law before, it required a mandatory $60 fee, $20 going to the local sheriff and $40 to the state. So essentially, there was a financial component to this that related to money. You want to know where laws are made, you follow the money. So I guess the state is saying we're gonna let go of this money grab in order for people to enjoy their Second Amendment rights. That's part of it, isn't it?
It is, and that's interesting. We've seen that actually around the country recently, and Kentucky is part of a growing trend of states that are, declining to require licenses and sort of expanding Second Amendment rights. But it is interesting that part of that is, essentially universally throughout the country, is states giving up money in order to make that happen. And you wonder what the trade-off is. And, quite frankly, I'm not sure, but like you mentioned, there is, you don't see the government just giving up money very often.
No, and I applaud that. Anytime the government's going to let me keep more of my money, I'm always in favor of that, Emily. Under the newly signed law, those 21 and older who meet legal rules for gun ownership, it's not like just anybody can go and get a gun. You got to meet legal rules for gun ownership, and they can legally carry a concealed firearm without a permit. What are the legal rules for gun ownership, though? That's not clearly defined here.
So what they're referring to are what we have under federal law. So if you are a convicted felon, you will not be able to carry in Kentucky. If you are, and this is, of course, true throughout the whole state, but this is what Kentucky's relying on. Through the whole country, this is what Kentucky's relying on. Being convicted felon, having been convicted of a crime of domestic violence. If you have ever been adjudicated mentally unstable or involuntarily committed to a mental institution, if you are not a citizen of this country or have legal permanent, a green card, if you, are a habitual user of marijuana or other narcotics, the list goes on and on of those who are not allowed under federal law to own, possess, or carry firearms, and that's what Kentucky is going to rely upon here.
Well, I totally agree with a lot of what that was, and the people who've committed the mass shootings, which always calls for these knee-jerk calls for action to severely restrict people's gun ownership rights and the ability to own legally a firearm and the like. It all goes, most of these mass shootings are all people who are obviously insane. There were plenty of red flags before. Why did they have a gun? Why were they able to possess a gun? Why didn't somebody pay attention to all the warning signs in the past? We saw that with the Parkland shooting. We've seen it, dozens and dozens of cases around the world. The only one that's a real mystery still is the Las Vegas shooting, where we have absolutely still no idea why this guy went on this rampage and killed all those people at the concert venue in Las Vegas. To this day, we still don't have answers about that. But mainly, primarily, these are people, if you look at it in retrospect, and hindsight's always 20/20, they were nuts. They never should have had access to a gun.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And in many of these instances, they actually were already restricted from firearms ownership under federal law.
And it didn't keep them from getting a gun, did it?
It did not. So that's part of the, part of the problem we have in this country when we expand gun restrictions is you're relying on people who have already broken laws or who are already mentally unstable to, agree to the social contract, which is that they'll abide by the law. And, unfortunately, when we continue to restrict and we continue to just trust in criminals and in, the insane that they will do the right thing and abide by the law, really what we're doing is just taking the guns away from the people like you and I who are willing to abide by the law.
Exactly. I live in Kentucky, and I'm not worried at all about this change in the law. It doesn't take effect until the end of the session, which is March 26, 90 days after that. It becomes law in the Commonwealth, and I am not concerned about this at all. Any more concerned than I was when people had to have a permit to have a concealed carry weapon. Go ahead.
We don't see an increase in crime when states go to constitutional carry, so you are absolutely right to have no fears here.
Yeah, what do you think about this law in Kentucky? What are your feelings on having a permit to have concealed carry?
Any expansion of Second Amendment rights is good. The only worry I have, and of course I live in a state that does not have constitutional carry, so it's difficult for me to say, but the only worry I have is that I do think it's a good thing. Most states have some sort of requirement that you at least know how to load and operate your pistol before carrying. I worry a little bit that an uptick in negligent discharge is going to be inevitable after constitutional carry because you may have those people who don't really understand how to operate a pistol, who just go out and buy one and go for it. But, it's certainly not going to increase crime or the criminal element. I worry it'll increase accidents.
You touched on a great point, Emily. Previously, the law required a 6-hour gun safety and training class. And I'm fully in favor of that. That's the only part of this that kind of troubles me, is that there's no training. I mean, there are plenty of places you can go and train yourself, and I think it's a responsible thing if you're going to own a gun and you're going to possess a gun and you're going to conceal carry a gun. You go somewhere like Point Blank or somewhere like that, and you learn how to effectively use it. So you're right. There's no accidental discharge. We don't have these accidents happening with people who are not criminals because they simply don't know how to use the tool that's in their belt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. But, that's, we will, I think, wait and see how big a risk that actually poses.
And by the way, if you're a Kentuckian, you still have the option to get a concealed carry permit if you want to, but why? And that's the other point is like, why give up the $60? Why go through all of the hurdles and go through the hoops when in about, 100 days, you're going to be able to legally possess a firearm if you pass all the other gun safety regulations that are on the books federally in Kentucky. I don't know why anybody would go and get a permit now.
If they're travelers, they may still want to get a permit because bear in mind that you come to a state like Texas, or if you're a frequent traveler outside of Kentucky and you want to have reciprocity and you want to carry your pistol, you are way more likely to be able to do that with a permit.
All right. Emily Taylor, thank you for your time this morning. Good stuff.
Thank you very much.